Picture this. In the middle of a sun-scorched desert, where summer temperatures reach 50 degrees Celsius, a real river flows, and 1 million fish swim in it. Sounds like science fiction? But this is reality, created by Israel in the very heart of the Negev Desert. Subscribe to the channel, it will be interesting. The Negev Desert covers more than half of Israel's territory. This is a place where rain falls only a few times a year, and ancient riverbeds have long turned into dry, rocky ravines. For centuries, Bedouins wandered here, learning to survive where there is almost no water. In the 20th century, Jewish settlers began developing these barren lands. They built kibbutzim, laid pipelines, invented drip irrigation. Every drop of water was valued like gold. But the dream of a living river in the desert seemed unattainable. Everything changed in the early 21st century when Israel made a breakthrough in seawater desalination technologies. Huge facilities on the Mediterranean coast began turning salt water into fresh water. This gave the country breathing room, the ability to think not only about survival, but also about restoring nature. Parallel to this, a wastewater treatment system was developing. Israel achieved the record 90% recycling rate, something no other country has accomplished. Treated water was directed to agricultural fields, freeing up precious freshwater resources for other purposes. It was then that a group of scientists from Ben Gurion University proposed a crazy idea: create an artificial river ecosystem right in the desert. Not just a water canal, but a real living system with fish, plants, and microorganisms. Many called it fantasy, but the researchers believed in success. The first stage was a detailed study of the Negev's geology. Scientists discovered something amazing. Beneath the sands, at depths of 15 to 30 meters, lie ancient aquifers. This water accumulated there thousands of years ago when the climate was wetter. But the most interesting thing was that the underground water naturally heated up to 40 degrees Celsius through geothermal processes. It was brackish, unfit for drinking, but ideal for creating a stable aquatic environment. The engineering team developed a unique water supply system. They combined warm underground water with treated surface water, creating an optimal balance of temperature and salinity. The water had to flow constantly, mimicking a natural river current. Choosing the location for the future river took several months. They needed to find a site with suitable terrain where water could flow by gravity, creating natural movement. Ultimately, they chose a valley in the central part of the Negev, protected from the harshest winds. Territory preparation began. Bulldozers formed the riverbed. Excavators created depth variations where fish could find shelter. Landscape specialists planted drought-resistant plants along the future banks. Tamarisk, acacia, date palms. At the same time, monitoring infrastructure was being built. Along the entire length of the future river, they installed automatic stations capable of tracking dozens of parameters around the clock: temperature, oxygen, pH level, nutrient content, flow rate. When the technical part was ready, the most crucial stage began: launching the water. The first streams flowed through the riverbed in February 2023. Engineers carefully controlled every litre, regulating the supply to avoid eroding the banks and create stable flow. The next 6 months were spent stabilising the aquatic environment. They needed to wait for a layer of bottom sediments to form, for beneficial bacteria to multiply, and for riparian plants to take root. This was a waiting period, when the river existed, but there was no life in it yet. This section survived both heat and sharp nighttime cold snaps. The geothermal components helped maintain a more even temperature. Even when the air dropped to 0 and below, the water remained in a comfortable range for living organisms, and didn't plunge into icy stress. In summer 2023, testing began with small groups of fish. They release several hundred tilapia into specially isolated sections. These fish originate from Africa. They are hardy, reproduce quickly, and tolerate changing conditions well. The results of the first tests were encouraging. Tilapia not only survived, it demonstrated normal behaviour, exploring territory, feeding, forming schools. This gave the green light for the main stage of the project. D-Day arrived, January 2024. A convoy of trucks with special tanks equipped with oxygen supply systems pulled up to the valley. They contained 1 million fish of various species raised on fish farms throughout Israel. The team of ichthyologists worked with surgical precision. The fish couldn't just be dumped into the water. That would cause shock and mass mortality. Each batch was first placed in intermediate containers, where the water temperature gradually equalized with the rivers. The release process stretched over 3 days. Tilapia made up approximately 60% of the total number. Another 30% were carp, resistant to various conditions. The remaining 10% were local desert species, capable of living in brackish water. The first day after the launch was the most tense for the entire team. People worked around the clock, observing fish behaviour through underwater cameras. Some individuals immediately began swimming actively. Others froze at the bottom, getting used to the new environment. In the first days, oxygen dropped, and this was expected. 1 million fish consume it quickly. Then they turned on additional aerators to increase mixing and saturate the water with air, while the system reached a stable regime. By the end of the first week, the picture became clearer. About 15% of the fish died in the first days, which matched predictions. The rest adapted and began distributing themselves along the river, finding suitable sections depending on current speed and depth. Tilapia occupied shallow, warm zones where sunlight heated the water most intensely. Carp preferred deeper and cooler sections with slow current. Local species settled in transition zones, demonstrating remarkable flexibility. After a month, an unexpected effect appeared. The biomass of phytoplankton, microscopic algae, increased sharply. The reason is simple. Fish waste enriched the water with nitrogen and phosphorus, and food chains began to activate. Phytoplankton became the food base for zooplankton, tiny crustaceans and other microorganisms. They, in turn, supported juveniles and small fish. The food chain began forming naturally, without additional intervention. In spring 2024, the first signs appeared that the ecosystem was working. Riparian plants, receiving nutrients from the water, grew so much they began providing shade. This created additional microzones with different temperatures and different current speeds near the shore. Birds also noticed the new river. Herons and cormorants flew in first, attracted by the abundance of fish. This was both pleasing and worrying. The young system still needed time to withstand such pressure. By summer 2024, the number of birds increased, and they had to make some sections more protected. Nets were stretched over some zones so fish had quiet places, especially where spawning was expected. In autumn, the Israel Nature and Parks Authority conducted the first large-scale survey. Biologists used electrofishing, a method of temporarily stunning fish with weak current for counting and inspection. The results exceeded expectations. More than 750,000 individuals survived. But the main discovery was something else. When examining caught fish, they found pregnant female tilapia. This meant the fish weren't just surviving, they were preparing to reproduce. Although early expectations suggested this would take more time. Reproduction began in December 2024. Female tilapia laid eggs in shallow, protected coves where current was minimal. Males guarded territories, demonstrating aggressive behaviour toward competitors. The first fry appeared 2 weeks later. Tiny, translucent fish stayed near the bottom, feeding on zooplankton. Their survival rate in nature is always low, But even a small fraction of survivors quickly changes the balance in a young system. January 2025 brought a test by cold. Nighttime temperatures in the Negev dropped unusually low, and the team expected problems. But the water stayed in a warm corridor thanks to geothermal support, and this became one of the strongest arguments in favour of the chosen scheme. In spring 2025, the fish population in the river was estimated at approximately 1,200,000 individuals. Natural reproduction compensated for losses from birds and disease. The ecosystem began working not only on external support, but also on its own dynamics. However, population growth created a new problem. On hot days, the oxygen level in the water began dropping faster than desired. Warm water holds less oxygen, and this forced the system to work more precisely. Then they intensified aeration and slightly increased flow rate. Additionally, part of the water supply regime was reconfigured to reduce stagnant sections during the hottest weeks and give the water more movement. In summer 2025, the first serious disease outbreak occurred. Several hundred carp in one section of the river began showing signs of fungal infection. Body sores, lethargy, refusal to eat. Everything pointed to a problem. The veterinary team urgently isolated the infected section, installing temporary mesh barriers. Sick fish were caught and destroyed to prevent the infection from spreading. The rest in the isolated zone were treated with antifungal agent. Fortunately, the outbreak didn't spread further. This episode became a reminder. The system may look alive and confident, but sometimes one pathogen is enough to push it to the brink. This incident reminded everyone of a simple thing. Even a beautifully functioning system remains vulnerable to details that in reports are usually written in one line. In autumn 2025, another unexpected event occurred in the river. Fish they hadn't released began appearing in samples. There could be several explanations. One likely version was egg transfer by birds, which sometimes happens in nature. Among the new guests were small local species living in temporary water bodies after rare rains. This revealed an interesting duality of the project. Hydrologically, it remains closed and managed, but biologically, it's already connected to the surrounding environment through birds, insects, and vegetation. In winter 2025 and 26, the population was estimated at approximately 1.5 million individuals. Reproduction continued, and juveniles found shelter in riparian thickets and sections with weak current. But scientists understood, the real test is still ahead. The ecosystem has only existed for 2 years, and that's a tiny time frame on natural scales. They need to observe for at least 5, preferably 10 years, to draw confident conclusions, especially for a desert zone. Meanwhile, interest in the project began growing, and this was expected. Delegations from neighbouring countries came to see the system in person, because water scarcity in the region has long ceased being theory and became daily politics and economics. Persian Gulf states were watching especially closely. There's almost no fresh water there, but there are resources and desire to build solutions for decades ahead. Such a pilot project looked like a rare opportunity to test ideas not on paper, but in reality. However, direct copying of the Israeli model is impossible. Each desert is unique. One has different geology, another has different chemical composition of groundwater, a third has unpredictable winds and dust storms. Even a successful scheme requires adaptation. Israeli scientists gradually prepared publications and reports on early results. Importantly, the project was positioned as a demonstration of approach, not a ready universal template. Here were the key words: pilot, control, hypothesis testing. The Negev project showed several fundamental things. First, modern water treatment and desalination technologies allow allocating resources for ecosystem restoration without directly taking water from cities. Second, Geothermal underground water in desert regions can work as a natural temperature stabilizer. Such warmth reduces the risk of sharp fluctuations, meaning it supports life in seasons when ordinary desert water would become too cold or unstable. Third, proper species selection is critically important. Tilapia and carp were not chosen randomly. They are hardy, omnivorous, quickly gain mass, and can tolerate water parameter fluctuations that are inevitable in the desert. Fourth, parameter management is more important than beautiful promises. In this story, the winner is not the one who talks louder about miracles, but the one who knows how to reduce load in time, add aeration, adjust flow, and isn't shy about acknowledging risk. The economic side of the project also deserves attention. Initial investments amounted to about $15 million. This includes infrastructure construction, monitoring systems, fish stocking, and maintenance for the first 2 years. Current expenses for system maintenance are about $500,000 per year. This is energy for pumps and aerators, staff salaries, and equipment maintenance. For Israel, these are acceptable costs for an ecological experiment of global significance. There is also potential economic return. The river attracts visitors and educational groups, becomes a place where students study ecological restoration. In the future, a careful amateur fishing model is possible if biologists consider it safe. But the main value of the project isn't in money. It shows that humans can be not only destroyers, but also architects of restoration if they act carefully and scientifically. Against the backdrop of droughts and disappearing rivers, such an example resonates with people precisely because it's alive. Critics of the project point to its artificiality. Indeed, this is not a wild natural river, but a carefully designed system dependent on technology. But in the 21st century, the boundary between natural and human-made is increasingly blurred. Take, for example, Dutch polders, lands reclaimed from the sea. These are absolutely artificial landscapes, but they became home to millions of people and thousands of plant and animal species. Or Singapore's vertical forests, where trees grow on skyscrapers. The Israeli Desert River continues this tradition of ecological engineering. It shows that in the era of climate crisis, waiting for mercy from nature can be dangerous. Sometimes it's necessary to design sustainable systems capable of existing in new conditions. It's interesting to compare this project with other desert greening attempts. China spent billions on the Great Green Wall, planting billions of trees along the Gobi Desert border. But many trees died due to lack of water. Arab countries are building hydroponic farms where plants receive water directly to roots without soil. This works for vegetable production, but doesn't create ecosystems. The Israeli approach tries to find a balance between technology and nature. Some ecologists worry about long-term consequences. What if the system gets out of control? What if invasive species penetrate the river and displace the released fish? What if climate conditions change and geothermal water becomes less stable? These concerns are justified. History knows examples when human interventions in nature led to catastrophes. Introduction of rabbits to Australia, stocking African perch in Lake Victoria, draining of the Aral Sea in the Soviet Union. But the Israeli team learned these lessons. Hydrologically, the circuit is controlled, and the task is to prevent water from freely flowing into natural channels. At the same time, impact on surrounding life still appears through birds, insects, and vegetation. And this is viewed as part of observations, not as a side effect that can be ignored. Moreover, in an emergency situation, the project can be quickly switched to shutdown mode. It's enough to shut off the water supply, and the section will begin losing volume, and fish can be caught and relocated. This isn't an ideal option, but it exists as insurance. The philosophical aspect of the project also deserves attention. What is nature in the 21st century? Can we call nature only what exists without human participation? Or is an ecosystem we created also part of nature if it already has a self-sustaining cycle? These questions go beyond ecology and touch on our understanding of humanity's place in the world. We can no longer be passive observers. Our influence on the planet is so great that we have become a force changing climate and landscapes. The Israeli River in the desert symbolizes a new approach to relations with nature. Not conquest and not blind non-interference, but careful partnership. We create conditions, nature responds, and then fine-tuning begins. By the beginning of 2026, the project approached a critical phase. The next few years will show whether the system can exist for decades or if this is temporary success that will end in collapse. Future plans are ambitious. If the river continues functioning stably, they plan to expand it. Additional sections can be created in other parts of the Negev, gradually forming a network of artificial water bodies through the desert. Also being discussed is possible integration with agriculture. Water from the river after filtration can be used for field irrigation. Fish waste, rich in nutrients, will become organic fertilizer. This will create a closed production cycle. Researchers are studying the possibility of releasing commercial fish species into the river. If controlled fishing can be established, this will provide an additional protein source for the region. Israel imports most fish. Domestic production will reduce dependence. But all these plans depend on one thing: the stability of the existing system. It's too early to talk about scaling. They need to make sure the river withstands the test of time, droughts, possible fish diseases, and other unforeseen challenges. Meanwhile, similar projects are beginning to appear in other countries. Morocco launched a pilot program in the Sahara Desert using Israel's experience. The United Arab Emirates is investing in research on creating artificial oases with water systems. Even in the United States, in Arizona, where the Sonoran Desert suffers from drought and the Colorado River is shrinking, authorities are considering creating closed water systems based on recycled water and renewable energy. Global warming makes the water problem increasingly acute. According to UN forecasts, by 2050, more than half of Earth's population will live in regions with fresh water scarcity. Traditional solutions, dams and reservoirs, are no longer coping. New approaches are needed, combining desalination technologies, recycling, efficient use and restoration of water ecosystems. The Israeli project in the Negev can become one working demonstration of what this looks like in real infrastructure, not in a presentation. It's important to understand the limitations. Creating an artificial river in the desert requires significant investment, technology, and expertise. This is not a universal solution for poor countries where there are no resources for such experiments. But technologies are getting cheaper. What costs $15 million today might cost $5 in 10 years. Solar energy in deserts is almost free. Desalination plants are becoming more efficient. Monitoring systems cheaper thanks to mass production of sensors. Over time, similar projects may become accessible even to developing countries. International organizations like the World Bank and UN Environment Programs are already showing interest in financing similar initiatives in Africa and Asia. The educational aspect of the project cannot be underestimated. Ben-Gurion University created a special program for students from developing countries, where they study water resource management technologies in arid regions. Graduates of this program return home with knowledge and experience they can apply in their countries. This creates a global network of specialists capable of implementing advanced water management methods and ecosystem restoration. The social effect of the project is also significant. Local Bedouin communities, traditionally engaged in livestock farming, are now involved in monitoring and maintaining the river system. This gives them stable income and new skills. Youth from Bedouin settlements receive training in working with sensors, equipment maintenance, and fish care. The project becomes a bridge between traditional lifestyle and modern technology, helping preserve cultural identity while adapting to new realities. The tourist potential of the river is also being realised. Ecotourism in deserts is gaining popularity. People travel to see with their own eyes an incredible sight. A living river with fish in the middle of scorched sands, where summer temperatures exceed 50 degrees. Observation platforms have been built. Educational tours organised where guides talk about the technologies of creating the system, fish species, and the importance of water resources. This attracts visitors annually, bringing income to the region, even if the scale remains modest for now. Some critics call the project a show-off, an expensive demonstration of technological superiority without real benefit. Why spend millions on fish in the desert when this money could be directed to solving social problems? The answer is that these aren't just fish. This is a scientific platform, a testing ground for technologies that may be useful to millions of people in the future. Every lesson here is tested in the field, not in a model, and that's a completely different level of value. Moreover, the project creates jobs, attracts visitors, and produces knowledge. This is an investment not only in ecology, but also in economy, education, and science. Long-term return may exceed initial investments. In a world full of alarming news about climate and species extinction, this project resonates because it shows action. Not a promise, not a slogan, but an attempt to build a working mechanism where nature has been silent for a long time. Israeli scientists are the first to acknowledge the system's fragility and risks of failure. But they also show that with an approach based on science, measurements, and willingness to change regime, boundaries of the possible can be pushed. The river in the Negev Desert has become a symbol of a new attitude toward nature. Not exploitation, and not romantic non-interference, but active, scientifically based management. We live in the Anthropocene era, when humans have become one of the main forces shaping the planet. This imposes responsibility. We can no longer afford to be careless. Every decision about land use, water use, and energy must be made considering long-term consequences for ecosystems and climate. The Israeli project shows what this can look like in practice. Months of preparation, thousands of measurements, constant adjustment of regimes, willingness to stop and go back a step. This requires patience, investment, and expertise. In 20 years, we'll look back and assess whether this project became the beginning of a new era of desert restoration or remained a singular experiment. Much depends on how events unfold in the coming years. If the system remains stable, if the fish population continues growing naturally, if catastrophic disease outbreaks and oxygen collapse can be avoided, this will prove the concept's viability. Then similar projects will begin being implemented everywhere. If the system collapses, that will also be a valuable lesson. We'll learn which factors we underestimated, where we made calculation errors, what needs to be changed. Science develops through mistakes no less than through successes. For now, in January 2026, 1 million fish continue swimming in the desert river. They feed, reproduce, and interact with riparian plants and birds. The ecosystem lives, breathes, and evolves. This is an incredible achievement. In the middle of one of the planet's harshest deserts, humans created an oasis of life, using technology, science, and determination. Regardless of what happens next, this moment has already entered history as proof of human ingenuity. 1 million fish in the Negev Desert is not just an ecological experiment. It's a message to future generations. We can fix past mistakes. We are capable of creating, not just destroying. In a world where deserts are advancing and water is becoming scarce, this is a vitally important message. If you're interested in stories about technologies changing our world, subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this desert river will be able to exist in 10 years? Or is it doomed to dry up? Write what solutions for combating water scarcity you consider most promising.